on the other side of the 49er Stadium. And so I love speaking at events like this because I don't have to drive too far. Usually I'm in San Francisco or up the peninsula, and it's hard to get home in time to see my little girls to bed every night. So I have actually 10 copies of my book. I'm not that type of guy that buys like 1,000 copies and keeps them in my office Trunk. And hands them out to everybody who comes in. But my publisher did send me about 30 copies. And so I have 10 here because I gave a few others away. I have 10 copies here that I will pass out and do the drawing. So I think we're going to pass around a hat or some type of tin cup or something. Throw in either your name and email address or a business card, and we'll do some type of drawing towards the end. Okay? Let's see, where do I start? Well, I'm a recovering direct marketer. And I spent my entire career in the mid-2000s working in direct marketing. And so when I looked at consumers, I used to count page views and click-throughs, and I would talk about consumers as target audience or a demographic or some type of segment. And I realized as social became important and grew and how we come to adopt social, that consumers and business people don't like to be referred to as target audience and segments and page views and clicks. And so that's what kind of transitioned my thinking into more relationship building within what we call social media today. Now, whether you work in within a large brand or you are doing consulting, I met this wonderful woman earlier tonight who does personal financial consulting. Whether you work in a startup environment, you have to think about the stories that you want to tell in terms of differentiating yourself from your competitors, and then also how to reach your target consumer on a multitude of different channels, telling a very consistent story. So there's a statistic from a company that I used to work for, Edelman. Every year they did a trust barometer, and what they found was that in order for a consumer or a quote-unquote target audience to believe your message, they need to hear it, see it, or interact with it 3 to 5 times. So what that means is when they Google information about your product, are they seeing a story? When they are within their feed in Facebook or Twitter, are they seeing a similar story? When they're talking to one of your customers, are they telling the same story that you want them to? So they need to interact with your content 3 to 5 times, and it's not very easy to do, right? And I'm going to talk about tonight, and I'm going to give you a high-level synopsis, basically of what I wrote in these almost 300 pages. Now, unfortunately, I can't give a copy to everyone, but I feel like if you like what you hear today and you don't get a copy, they're 18 bucks on Amazon, or you can download it on Kindle for 10 bucks. So I want to talk about quickly, and I have an hour. Is that right, Paul? Yeah. Okay. Oops, this is not working.
Got to turn it on.
Turn it on. Hello.
There's a slide.
The on button. I do work in technology. There we go. I want to talk about 5 truths that are shaping the way that we have to interact with our target consumers. And the first one is that we live in a content and media surplus, right? There is no shortage of devices. There is no shortage of content available to us as consumers of content. Whether you work in B2B, whether you're a VC or you're a CEO of a startup, there is no shortage of ways that we can consume a multitude of different content, right? In fact, we are as consumers are inundated with about 3,000 advertising messages every single day. That doesn't include tweets, that doesn't include text messages, that doesn't include status updates, that doesn't include the time that we spend on LinkedIn. So imagine all that content and media. How do we focus with all that information hitting us? The second trend is that we have an attention deficit. How many times have you walked into a restaurant and saw a family of 4 sitting at a table all looking down at their devices, right? I have not been officially diagnosed, but I'm sure I have some level of ADD because I'm constantly looking at devices during commercials. Even when I'm watching shows, I'm watching a show and I'm tweeting at the same time, and thank God I have a DVR because I have to rewind a lot and say, oh, I missed that part. Because I'm constantly consuming various forms of content, and my attention is at a deficit, right? We as human beings, we can only consume a finite amount of content at a very specific moment in time, right? So think about the filters that we have to put up so that we only consume the content that is relevant to us at a very specific moment in time. Our journey as consumers is dynamic, and it's unpredictable. Every morning I wake up, what's the first, how many of you sleep with your devices? How many of you sleep with your devices? Not in your pocket, but like right by the bed. Okay, I do too. And the first thing typically I do when I wake up in the morning is I check my notifications, right? I check to see if I have any private messages on Facebook. I check to see how many tweets I've gotten or how many likes on Instagram I've had. Then I check email. And sometimes I go to LinkedIn and see who's stalking me on my LinkedIn profile. I do that pretty much every single day. I get to work. I Google things that I need throughout the day. I'm checking Twitter during meetings. But my pattern is not predictable. It's dynamic and it changes every single day. We have tunnel vision. About 5 years ago, I was in the process of refinancing my home. I would drive down 101 and I would see billboards from Wells Fargo. I would see billboards from Quicken Loans talking about 3.9% APR. I'd hear conversations in the hallway about people refinancing. I'd see status updates on Facebook about people refinancing. And what's interesting is when I finally found the lender that I wanted to go with and refinance my home and sign my paperwork, all of those ads, all of those conversations went away. But they didn't really go away, right? They just became irrelevant, so I put a filter up and moved on. So the last point here is that all consumers are influential. There are certain airlines that I fly only because a friend had a great experience on a specific airline. I'm thinking Virgin America or Southwest. So I typically only fly those because I have excellent experiences there. I don't fly Delta Airlines because I've had personal experiences there, and all my friends have had very negative personal experiences there as well. So we are aiding and influencing our micro communities down the purchase funnel to either purchase products and services or to not purchase products and services. Okay? So think about those 5 key traits: content surplus, attention deficit, consumers' lives are unpredictable, consumers have tunnel vision, and they're all influential. Now, think about that for a second. You're in marketing or you have a startup. How do you reach a consumer with your message? If you're in B2B sales, how do you reach that buyer or that IT decision maker with a message that resonates? It's very, very difficult to do. Now, when you think about content from an internal perspective, right, you have several other challenges. Many times you don't have enough budget. Many times you don't have enough people. Many times you have not enough training, or you don't have the resources needed to create content to reach those consumers. So you have all of these external barriers. You have internal challenges. It almost makes your life as a marketer or small business owner or consultant, it makes it very difficult, almost impossible, to reach your target audience through social or through search or through word of mouth marketing. Despite all that, despite what's happening externally, despite what's happening internally, you still have business objectives. You still have bills to pay. You still have a mortgage to make. You may be responsible for stock price. You may be responsible for customer acquisition. You may be responsible for selling your startup. So you as an organization or you as a business owner cannot, even if you're frustrated, you can't just sit and wait for the external market to change, because it never will. The key point here is that you have to change your thinking. And that's what we're going to talk about today, that in order for you to reach your audience with a message that sticks, you have to think like a media company. And I'm going to define a media company in one moment. Before I talk about what a media company is, I think it's good to level set, because when I say media company, I'm talking about a traditional media company like a Gannett, or they own USA Today and Brides Magazine, right? Or Condé Nast, right? They're media companies that tell really targeted and really good stories at a specific audience, right? If you're in the market, if you're helping a cousin or a friend get married, you might purchase Brides Magazine and get good advice on wedding dresses or photographers, right? And that's the stories that they tell, and they do a really good job at it. They are producing mass amounts of content every single day through print, through web, through social. Well, let's talk about, even today when you think about media company, even some would consider Google a media company. and Facebook, right? And Twitter, right? They're producing content and they're selling their kind of platform from an advertising perspective. But the 5 characteristics that I think are important to talk about is, one is media companies are storytellers. They tell a very precise story and they're really good at it and they're very focused. If you think about your traditional news media, let's talk about Fox News for one moment, right? They differentiate the way that they tell stories, saying that they're fair and balanced. Now, whether you agree with that or not, it doesn't matter, right? That is their focus. That is, you see that everywhere. That is the lens at which they tell their story, and they're a leading cable news outlet. So think about that as you think about how the stories that you want to tell, whether you're a financial planner or you're trying to sell your startup. What is that story that can stick across several different media channels? Number 2 is that media companies are content machines. The New York Times publishes 3,000 articles every single day. That doesn't include their blogging platform. They produce about 400 or 500 unique blogs a day. That is long form content. That is 250 to 1,500 words every single day. Now, I laugh when some of my clients say, well, we can't even blog once a week. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You're just not doing it right. And I'm going to tell you how to do that later. But they are producing they are content machines, okay? The third is that content is relevance. And it's relevant to somebody all the time, everywhere. When I was flying to New York last year during the Boston bombing, I remember checking my feed when I was able to log onto my phone, and I saw all these comments about Boston and tragedy, and I didn't really get the full story. The first thing I did was I Googled Boston, and I saw hundreds of stories from the Boston.com, the Boston Globe, all these relevant media channels appearing in the search results because it was relevant to my search. It was relevant to what I saw earlier within my social network. And that kind of hits this one, ubiquity. Media companies are everywhere. Google social media, and what do you get? You get articles from Huffington Post, you get articles from Forbes, you get articles from Social Media Examiner or Social Media Explorer, all these kind of media publications, and they're producing long-form content that is affecting the visibility of their platform in search. The last one is agility. Now, it's very easy for media companies to produce content on the fly. Sometimes they're doing it in real time. Sometimes they're doing it within a few hours. It just depends on what news that they're reporting. This is probably the hardest one for companies because there are so many approval processes needed, especially within large B2B companies or pharma, that needs to go through a series of approvals before things get published, right? So this idea of building what I call the content supply chain, which are editorial workflows that help facilitate content ideation all the way to content distribution effectively and quickly, okay? So those are the 5 kind of characteristics of a media company. I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind. Now, it's very easy for me to be up here and say, you know what, you need to think like a media company. But it's actually really hard to do, right? It requires a shift in thinking. It requires a shift in operations. It requires a shift in just your entire mindset as it relates to content strategy, or what's called today content marketing, which is a huge buzzword in the marketplace today. In order to make that shift, there's what's called, and it's been defined over the last few years, of social business strategy, right? It's this idea of taking everything that you're doing internally and partnering with human resources, partnering with internal comms, partnering with employee engagement, and everything you're doing on the external side of things, so marketing, PR, customer support, and delivering business value across the entire ecosystem with social kind of being that infrastructure, okay? So that's what I mean by social business strategy, and I'll just read it in case you can't see it from here. It is a documented plan of action that helps evolve and transform the thinking of an organization, bridging internal and external social initiatives, resulting in collaborative connections, a more social organization, and shared value for all stakeholders. And I want to touch on shared value for a moment, because I think we kind of forget that within our day-to-day workflow. And I'm just going to hit on this for one moment, because this really defines what shared value really means. Now, this actual workflow kind of is confusing, but let's look at it one step at a time. If this is your business, let's focus on your external stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders externally? It could be your venture capitalists. It could be the media. It's your customers. It's your partners, right? How do they deliver value back to your business? It's number one, right? It's sales. The more they buy from you, the more value that is to your business, the higher margins, the higher revenue. Advocacy, right? The more that they tell others about the great experiences they have with your business or your brand, that's an indirect sales channel. That is value back to your business. Sometimes they're giving you feedback. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. That is value back to your business. Now, the way that you close the loop on that value exchange is looking at number two. That's why social media is so prominent, right? That's why so many companies are hiring community managers, because of that. They want that interaction, that relationship, right? So the way that a brand delivers value externally is through that community engagement. You see a customer support. How many brands today are adopting support channels? Dell did it very early on. Zappos has done it. Even a lot of B2B companies are investing in platforms that are strictly for B2B customer support. And just by providing helpful content. Anybody here shop at Lowe's? Yeah, what about Home Depot? I actually started shopping at Lowe's recently because I had in my drain in my shower, I used to clean it out, and I stripped the screw. And I dropped one screw down the drain, unfortunately, but then I stripped another one. I couldn't get it out. So I was Googling how to take a stripped screw out. I'm not a handy guy. And I came across a video on YouTube created by Lowe's that showed me how I used a toothpick and it kind of caught, and I was able to get it out. So they provided me with helpful content, and now I'm a loyal customer to Lowe's. Okay?
It's true.
So that is kind of a two-way value exchange. In any relationship, there has to be there has to be value going in and coming out at the same time. Okay? My wife says so. That's for sure. So internally, how do you then think about this from a social perspective? How do you deliver value to your internal stakeholders, right? Your employees for sure, and your partners up and down the supply chain. Well, it's looking at number three, right? It's collaboration. You as an organization will get smarter if you're communicating with your team internally. So many companies, and I hate to say this, right, and silos will always exist. They're never going to go away, because when new management comes into a company, they bring in their own management philosophies, they bring in their own management people, and you have to start all over again. But if you're driving this change internally, you're going to facilitate and invest in maybe an IBM platform to drive some of that collaborative systems that allow people to communicate. It allows you to get your work done a little bit faster. Marketing knows what PR is doing, knows what customer support's doing, knows what EMEA and APAC and Latin America is doing, and that results in knowledge sharing. Everybody gets smarter when you're sharing knowledge. Yes, Mark?
So I'll bet Lowe's hired an outside company to do that video for it.
Absolutely.
And if your job is to get a product out the door, you already have a job, or your job is to finish the QA of a product, or get the documentation, whatever it is. This adds one more layer of stuff you need to do.
Yep.
And unlike other things that have immediate feedback, the product got released, the sale got closed, this is a much more amorphous and hard to quantify feedback. I guess it's pretty hard after the first few weeks to get people to continue to focus on this.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, that's the thing. When I came across that video on YouTube, I subscribed to their channel because they had a lot of helpful videos. And now as a subscriber to their YouTube channel, whenever they upload a new video, guess what? I get notified. And I go back to their channel whenever a new video gets posted. And 9 times out of 10, I'll tweet it, right? And say, hey, if you want to figure out how to patch up a wall, you can learn how to do that in 30 seconds, right? So they pulled me into their community by providing me with helpful content. They're talking to me more than once, more so than what direct marketing does, right? They're talking and they're empowering me to share good content within my community.
People inside Lowe's need to either have their job descriptions changed, or they need to be incented, or maybe you need to hire more people so that it's surfacing this internal information becomes part of somebody's job.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of companies are hiring what they're called, or facilitating and creating teams called centers of excellence, where they're kind of responsible for delivering on this entire ecosystem, right? And that involves training and partnering with HR. That involves communicating with employees, so working with internal communications, right? Especially in larger companies, it's much more difficult to do. So let me close out on this real quick. So looking at it from a value perspective, there are also a lot of companies are enabling their internal business partners or employees to participate in brand storytelling. Mark, you're a journalist. We're all journalists, though. Some of us are professional journalists and get paid to write. Others we're writing, we're publishing content. So think of it as an opportunity to empower employees to tell the story or the brand story through their lens. It's much more human that way than it is coming from a marketer like me. So the way that you deliver value, the way that value is delivered back to the business is through these 3 points. Process improvement. There's a local retail, anybody here shop at Whole Foods? Okay, they have a competitor in the Midwest, and I can't remember the name of it, but I was at a conference, and I met the VP of marketing.
Wild Oats?
Say again?
Wild Oats?
Wild Oats, yes.
I think it was, yes, okay. So I met with their VP of marketing, and basically he's like, you know what, Michael? We're growing so much. I walk into our stores, and I see the line all the way to the back of the aisle. And people are leaving because the wait is so long. And he says, so what I've done is I've hired a Six Sigma expert. Anybody know what a Six Sigma expert is?
Yeah.
Right? They look at process and they figure out how to eliminate the waste and make things more efficient. And he says, so I hired like 25 Six Sigma experts. I'm paying them millions of dollars, this company that does this, and they're trying to figure out how to move people through the purchase or through the cash register line faster, so that people don't leave. He's like, I'm not ready to open up any more stores right now, so this is my short-term solution. And I said, that's a great idea. I said, well, what about your cashiers? Have you talked to them? Because they're actually living the process every single day, right? They're getting the bags, and they're going beep, beep, and they're bagging, and they're doing this. And he looks at me and he goes, oh my God, I never thought to talk to my employees. And it kind of, it's very intuitive, but he never did. What about product innovation, right? How many of you here shop on Amazon? How many of you are Prime members? Who does not know what Amazon Prime is?
We should all be Prime members.
Everybody knows what Prime is. Seriously? Okay, Amazon Prime. I spend $80 a year to Amazon, and I get free 2-day shipping on like 80% of the products that whatever qualifies for Amazon Prime, I can ship it for free. I don't pay shipping, and I get access to their movie gallery, okay? So,
payback, right?
say again?
There's a payback.
There's a payback. What do you mean?
You get a return on your investment.
Really? Oh yeah, there's definitely, absolutely. That was because of all that shipping. I probably would pay 3 times that if I was not a Prime member. The point of this is that was an idea from an employee. His name is John, and he was an engineer in Seattle. It was part of a kind of an internal employee communications loyalty program that they were all brainstorming. Okay, so my point is you enable employees, you drive collaboration, and out comes great things, right? The last one is employee advocacy. I'm going to bring up Edelman, even though I don't work with them. They're still a great firm, but they do the trust barometer. And what they do, that trust barometer, every year it measures the trust that people have in CEOs, which is not very high, in the media, in academia, subject matter experts. And what's interesting is if you look on that, every year it's the same. People trust, number 1, academia. That's always at the top of the list. Number 2, subject matter experts. They could be with or within a company. Number 3, people like yourself. When I'm going to buy a brand new car, I talk to my friends who have just purchased a new car. When data center managers are looking to invest in new software, they're talking to their colleagues in those geek forums saying, well, this only goes, they're talking all their geek speaks, and that is influencing their purchase behavior. Also, like number 4 on that list is employees of a company. Not people like marketing people like me, but people who are building things, product engineers, product managers, product marketing people who are out there talking about technology or what the technology is doing for them as a consumer, right? So that to me is the big one. If you can empower your internal employees to be employee advocates, what happens then is you get this effect, right? Where you have employees now engaging externally with customers. If anybody here own an HP computer, laptop, if you've ever gone to their forums, they use lithium forums, right? You can go in there and you can say, hey, I'm having a problem with my HP whatever, the driver's not working. What you're going to see is you're going to see employees who work in product saying, oh, you need to do this, 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 and this, and this, and this. Oh, by the way, and it says I'm an HP employee, so it's all transparent. Okay, that is a form of brand storytelling. Now, this is the way that value is extracted from what I talked about in social business. But let me talk about quickly what that really means, right? There's so many things to consider. Now, when you think about social business, it really starts with the people of the organization, right? So behavior change, right? Leadership. The thing about change management is that it's imitated, right? My kids know how to eat with the fork and spoon because they saw me eat with the fork and spoon, okay? They just didn't figure it out one day. I didn't teach them. They just saw me do it and they did it. It's the same thing with change management at the executive level and at the employee level, right? If I see my manager working till 8 or 9 o'clock every night, in some cases I'm gonna feel like I need to be there. Like I don't wanna leave at 5 because, oh, everybody else is here, so I'm gonna stay here, wait for the first person to leave, then I'll leave, right? So in order for a business to become more social, it has to start at the top, right? And in some cases it starts in the top or it starts in the bottom, but it's supported at the top and you kind of meet at the middle. It's almost like the manager. I had a manager once who would always preach work-life balance, always. Yet I would always get emails from him at like 11 o'clock at night, and then I get to work at 7, I'd get another email saying, what do you think? Like I checked email between 11 and 6 that night, right? So we as managers or we as executives or we as entrepreneurs, if we truly want to affect change in social, we need to change our own behavior. That doesn't mean you need to start a Twitter account. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying maybe building a social into your workflow, right? Instead of having an executive admin write an internal newsletter, why don't you start an internal blog or use Yammer or use other tools, right? Other people will catch on. On top of that is process, all right? That's all the technology integration, it's policies, it's workflows. When I was at Intel many years ago, we had, in 2008, we had 180 Facebook pages. They were all targeted towards consumers. It took us 6 months just to figure out who owned these pages. Then another 12 months to shut them down and consolidate them. Now they have like 1 or 2, okay? So it's building a process to prevent things like that from happening in the future. And then the last piece is platforms. It's investing in the Jives and the Lithiums and the analytics and the community sites and things like that. Now, this is not my first book. This is actually my second book. My first book was published in 2011 called Smart Business, Social Business. And it argued that all business, large and small, need to be social for the sake of becoming social. The problem with that philosophy was that when I would talk to a marketing person or even an entrepreneur, they didn't really get it. They're like, well, how is that going to help me deliver results? How is that going to help me produce better content? How is that going to help me have more deeper relationships with customers? So my second book was really focused on that. How do you leverage the frameworks of social business to drive deeper in customer engagement? Whether you work in B2B, B2C, or government or healthcare, this leveraging kind of the framework that enables this is the way to go. More effective and relevant content, right? I'm going to talk to you briefly on how to do that. Smarter marketing that aligns to business goals, right? Talking about integrating converged media, so integrating paid, owned, and earned, and shared media, and then integrated community strategy and so on. Okay. Any questions so far while I take a sip of water? Am I going too fast, too slow? Speed it up.
You're talking about creating a tremendous amount of content and distributing it to lots of people and then people consuming it. How do you become selective about consuming that without exceeding your lifetime reading capacity very quickly?
Well, that's a great point. That's a very great point. So let me can I answer that as I get into the next piece? Okay.
Whatever works.
Okay. All right. So how do we get started? And I go deeply into this in the book. So there's a chapter for each of these. And if you think about, again, a media company, newsroom, same concept, right? You have people who are prepared to tell stories and create content, either planned content or real-time content. We all know the Oreo example, right? Everybody know the Oreo real-time marketing example from the Super Bowl last year? No, you don't. You don't. Okay, well, let me explain it. So, any Niner fans in here?
No.
Okay, great. I'm a huge Niner fan. Well, okay, so the Super Bowl last year, Baltimore was playing the Niners. It was 18-0 at halftime. The power went out at the stadium. The power was out for about an hour. And Oreo was quick on its heels and tweeted something pretty interesting. They said, "Power out? ? No problem." And they linked to an image of an Oreo in the dark and a glass of milk, and it said, "You can still dunk in the dark." Okay. So what they did is they created a really funny, really relevant piece of creative in minutes because they were listening and they were prepared, right? That triggered off a frenzy of all these companies trying to capitalize on the Grammys and this year's Super Bowl and all these cultural events, trying to create real-time content and follow what Oreos did. I personally missed the tweet because I was like very upset. We were down 18-0, and I was already like 5 beers in. I was like in the backyard throwing things. But we're going to talk about how real-time marketing is just a small, right here, is a small piece of your content strategy. Okay, so let me go through this. We're going to talk about these 3 things. Now, the first thing that you want to do is build a centralized team, right? And this, I put this model together specifically for a larger enterprise, but you can kind of take pieces that are relevant to you. So you have a centralized team that encompasses a lot of different business units, right? So thinking about analytics, thinking about a social media, maybe a corporate communications team, customer support, digital marketing, a brand or creative team. And then if you're a large multinational company, you have somebody that represents your regions, right? So APAC, EMEA, Latin America, or specific countries. Now what you have that's your kind of your core team. Now what's interesting about this is that many years ago, this team, now called kind of a center of excellence, used to be a committee, right? Where all these people would gather like once every 2 weeks and stop what they're doing in their day jobs and talk about social media, right? How do we get smarter in social media? What investments should we make in technology? How do we expand globally? Now, what used to be a committee are now actually fully functional reporting organizations with very, very large budgets. When I worked at Intel, we had a center of excellence. There were 4 of us. Today, it's like 20. And these people have large budgets, okay? And they're responsible for delivering content, helping regions, hiring agencies, investing in technology, training employees, putting together kind of social media policies, right? So the entire spectrum, looking at it strategically. Now, the way that group kind of works within the silos is that up here you have your kind of your traditional siloed organizations. If you work for a brand like Adobe, you might have Photoshop and Illustrator and Acrobat, all these different product groups. But here you have these groups that typically work in siloed organizations. Like they don't really, like support never really talks to marketing ops. And support doesn't talk to product groups or employee communications or marketing, right? So it's the job of the COE, remember going back to value, to deliver collaboration models so that there's communication, so that through governance and training, through technology deployment, through kind of a cohesive content strategy and potentially a channel strategy, to get these teams to work together so that when you are executing and telling stories through campaigns and initiatives, through paid, owned, and earned media, through general community management or kind of that day-to-day content, through even customer support, there's a consistency in the story that you're telling. Remember, your audience needs to see and interact with your content 3 to 5 times and through a multitude of different channels. So making sure that there's a consistent storyline across each of these groups and then taking those insights and reporting them back up to the organizations, right? So this may be different in your company, right? But you can kind of get a feel for what that responsibility might be. At which point you're going to have to assign roles and responsibilities, right? So this is an example of one of my clients back in a few years ago where they had several blog categories, right? And the blogs were very much focused on engineering, on customer support, on innovation, entrepreneurship. And so what happened was we decided to help them figure out the right strategy. So we helped them identify internally who is going to be your Facebook editor, right? They're going to be you can call it a community manager if you want, but they're the ones that are going to be publishing content on that Facebook page, and they're the only ones with access. When we first did an analysis on their channels, we found that they had 87 people within their organization that had access to their Facebook group, which had 24 million fans. Wow. 80 people, many of whom belong to different agencies. So you had third-party contributors, people, and when we did the analysis and the audit, we found that they were publishing content on Facebook targeted to U.S. audience at 2 o'clock in the morning. There were spelling errors, there were grammar errors, there were broken links, because there were no controls in place. So we identified a Facebook editor, we identified one for Twitter and one for Tumblr. Then they had like 10 different categories on their blog, and we assigned one editor for each category. So all of their contributors, whether it's employees, employee advocacy programs, influencer marketing campaigns, or customer advocacy programs, where customers were actually contributing content to branded channels, all went through a series of approvals before it was published. Okay? That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to do it regionally. So this is the way that we did it at Edelman. We had a blog, which was, we had one community manager who was kind of our global editor. And he was the guy that hit publish, right? And then we had a regional editor. I was a regional editor where I had responsibility for finding people in my region, which is the West Coast, so other employees, to contribute. So I would like literally go and talk to people saying, hey, can you write some blog posts for us, or what's your specialty? Mobile, digital marketing, paid media. And I would get them set up on a platform so that they can publish content to our blog, but it went through me first. So I had my own little kind of organization, my own media company, publishing content to me, which then I sent to our global editor to publish and put on the calendar. So the point is of this piece is that assigning roles and responsibilities that work for you and building controls that work for you is important. This is probably the most important piece of it, right? This is your narrative. This is what differentiates you from your competitors. Now, the way that I like to position this is, I don't want to call it your brand narrative, because you probably hired a branding agency to come up with your brand narrative, right? They probably produce a set of brand guidelines that say, this is how you talk about your product, this is how you talk about your brand, this is the size of your logo, and this is where it goes, and it shouldn't exceed 1 pixel to the right of any web browser, things like that, right? So that's not what this is. What this is this is how you talk about yourself through more conversational means. So Twitter, Facebook, blogs, even email marketing, okay? So the way that I look at it is that you have several inputs that can deliver a narrative. One input, obviously, is that core messaging, that core brand positioning, right? If you're BMW, what are you? The ultimate
driving
machine, right? That still needs to be part of the thinking as you're creating content, but you don't want to say that on Twitter, like, yeah, we're BMW, the ultimate driving machine. Nobody's going to care. So you have to figure out, by looking at all these other inputs, to figure out what is the consistent and relevant story that I want to tell that breaks through the clutter. This is probably the big one here. Current audience affinities. In other words, what else do your customers care about when they're not necessarily talking to you? That company that we did the audit for with 24 million fans, we found out that 80% of their fans also loved hip-hop music. And we even did a deeper analysis and found out that of that, like 90% of them loved Rihanna, and a high percentage of them liked Lady Gaga, and some of them liked Justin Bieber. So the point is that we were able to figure out what are those other affinities that we might be able to associate ourselves with when we're thinking about creating content. Yes?
How did you do that?
There's analytics tools that do that.
Okay.
Yeah. And I can talk to you afterward and give you some names. In the B2B side, we did an analysis for a local Bay Area company that it's in data centers. We found out that a high percentage of their fans on Facebook were all loved Star Wars and Star Trek. So we said, okay, how do we create content that doesn't necessarily always talk about us, but that resonates, and how can we create a piece of content that only they would get? Like, for example, one post was, we said Happy Valentine's Day. It was Valentine's Day, and we did a status update, and we wrote it in code that said Happy Valentine's Day. And like, I went to the page, I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, I had no idea what it meant, but if you're an engineer, you got it, right? And there was a ton of engagement, right? So that's one way to look at it. Also is, who is the audience that you're targeting? Because the audience that you're targeting may not be the current audience you have. So if you're targeting an audience that is does not reflect the profile on your Facebook page, then you're doing something wrong. You need to shift gears a little bit, or even Twitter. Twitter, actually, you have access to even more data about your customers.
So do you talk to the folks that you already have, or do you talk to the ones that you want to talk to?
It depends. I would say it depends on what your goals are, because you can't segment conversations. You can segment based on like geography and things like that, but not based on smaller things. Community. In what context does the community, when they talk about your brand, what do they say? I'm not talking about from a sentiment perspective, whether they say that your brand sucks or not. I'm saying when they talk about BMW within social, are they referring, does it map to the ultimate driving machine? Or are they validating your narrative, or are they providing insight that can help you shift the way that you talk about yourself? The same thing with the mainstream media. When the Wall Street Journal, when the New York Times, when TechCrunch, or when Valleywag or Slate or whoever talks about you, are they validating what you want them to say about you, or are they giving you insight as to the way that you may think about talking about yourself differently? That makes sense? We can't forget about content performance. What content has worked in the past, right? We know that visual storytelling is huge. And when I go to a fan page and I don't see any imagery or photos, they're missing out, right? Because they're not capturing the attention of us consumers with ADD in the newsfeed. Okay? Search. My background's in search, and so too many of us in social have forgot about the power of Google. How many of you has Googled a homepage, your homepage for everything?
Yeah.
When I want to go to my Gmail account, what do? I Google Gmail. When I want to go to my US Bank account, US Bank, I Google US Bank. When I want to go to ESPN, I Google ESPN. Click on the link and log in. Google is our homepage for everything. So understanding how consumers or B2B folks are searching for your business and or the value proposition that you have. So if you work in data centers, when somebody searches for data center or data center networking or Java programming or whatever it is, what appears in the search results, right? How are consumers searching for your content? I used to work for HP many years ago. And do you know that on HP.com that we refer to laptops as notebooks? Remember that? Everybody used to talk, when you would talk about a laptop, you say, oh, let me check out that notebook, right? Now the problem was that 90% of the people who were searching in Google and Yahoo for a notebook were looking for these. So they had to shift their entire messaging to match what consumers were searching, and it took them a long time, because when you talk about a website like HP.com or all these large manufacturing brands, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of pages, not to mention all your collateral in like Best Buy and everything. And the last one is customer support. So the goal here is then to take all of these inputs and figure out, okay, what is the story that we want to tell? And then I'm just going to skip up ahead a little bit. And then figuring out what are those general content themes that my brand feels comfortable talking about, right? So in this case, and this is just an example, right? So in one bucket, you may have campaigns, events, and promotions, right? Your CMO is going to say, well, we still need to sell products, so let's figure out a way to deliver a marketing message on Facebook. It's not just about relationship building, right? So 15% of it is marketing. 40% of it could be customer stories, right? It could be customer testimonials. It could be, for one of my old clients at Skype, it could be a story that she shared because her husband in Iraq was able to, see her 1-year-old birthday party, something like that, right? It's 20% could be customer support. The other 20% could be lifestyle content. I hope this adds up to 100%. And then 10% is real time. Now notice, only 10% is real time, right? This whole real-time content marketing buzzword, I just want to be clear. Real-time brands, your company cannot sit around and wait for the news cycle before you produce good content. You got to do that every single day. So in this scenario, what you want to do is you have your different content pillars or content themes. You'd have all of your channels, and you figure out, okay, what is the right, where can we focus, right? We have customer support. So in this case, we may have a Twitter handle for customer support. We may write blog posts for customer support, and then we may do a YouTube channel, just like Lowe's does, for customer support. We're not going to talk about customer support issues, though, on Facebook or Google Plus or LinkedIn, right? we're gonna talk about campaigns and events promotions there. We're gonna do customers. So it's basically mapping your storytelling initiatives to specific digital platforms. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So do those percentages depend on what kind of business you have, if it's B2B or B2C or people to people? I mean, or is it always that platform?
These percentages were off the top of my head.
Okay.
Basically, what I'm saying here is that when your customers are talking about your product, that conversation is much more trusted than me talking about my product. And so that's why that's the most, right? Versus, and lifestyle content could be a lot of things, right? For example, if I'm a jewelry manufacturer, would it make sense for me to talk about cereal on my Facebook page?
Well, I was wondering if you could describe your version of real-time content. I have my version, but where that stands is only as a lower level rather than a higher level.
Okay, I can answer that.
Okay.
But to get on my point, if I'm a jewelry manufacturer, I'm not talking about cereal on my channels.
Right.
There's no relevance there. But could I talk about fashion? Could I talk about health and wellness? Could I talk about yoga? Maybe. There could be some relevance there, right? People who are buying jewelry want to look good, so they may go to the gym, they may go to yoga class, or whatever, Taibo or whatever, Insanity, whatever it is. So this lifestyle content could be, it's kind of how comfortable your brand is talking about other things that are relevant to the audience. Okay? From a real-time content perspective, what companies are doing today, which is they're not doing it the right way. They're looking at cultural events like the Super Bowl, like the Olympics, and they're monitoring and they're trying to, some people call it newsjacking, or and so they're
Hitchhiking,
creating content
drafting.
using hashtags and trying to make their content relevant to a specific cultural event. Now, where they're missing out is they're not looking at analytics. And I'm going to talk briefly about the company that I work for, and this is one reason why I joined them, because they're very analytics driven. So don't you think it would make sense to say, if I'm HP or I'm Brocade or I'm Juniper and I'm trying to reach a certain group of people, like IT decision makers or CIOs, wouldn't I want to understand what's trending within this group that's over-indexing versus, against the higher population of Twitter, and provide content for this smaller group rather than being kind of everything to everyone? That's where brands are missing out. They're trying to be everything to everyone, and they're not focusing in on that group that they're actually trying to reach and influence. Okay, another thing is, and so many times we don't do this in our social channels. I encourage you to do this. Go through an exercise that will define your tone of voice in social, right? These are 4 that I just thought of, right? Approachable, fun, smart, enthusiastic. You can take your traditional brand guidelines and manipulate them specifically for social if you want, right? But if you hire an agency or you hire an intern or you have, you just hired a community manager, they're going to need to know like what the right tone of voice is. When I told you about that client that I did an audit for, that you can tell that every post on their timeline was written by someone else. Now, if that's your strategy, then that's fine. But that wasn't their strategy. They wanted to have one official tone of voice, but they didn't have any guidelines or direction. Yes?
Do you find that there's any pushback from like senior management and the corporation, the upper, to not really want to fund or a pushback on this tone?
All the time.
I do e-learning programs and I run into this all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
They want the corporate communication, appropriate language all the time.
Yep.
They don't want engaging language that pull people in, that make it fun, that maybe reach out to different age categories. But the minute I start to have fun or I start to be enthusiastic or something, bam.
Yep.
It gets edited.
Well, and then they scratch their head wondering why there's no engagement on their pages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly
I fight that battle every single day, so I'm with you on that one.
Okay.
But let's talk. I think there's some strategies on how to overcome that, which I found work. When you talk about your narrative, it needs to add value, right? So when you look at it, it certainly has to align to your business goals. Like I said, if you're a jewelry manufacturer, you're not talking about cereal. You're not talking about the Super Bowl unless maybe during a performance, somebody breaks their bracelet, right? That could be an opportunity for you to chime in somehow. So it has to be relevant, right? And it has to align to your business goals. Sometimes it has to be evergreen, which touches your point. It's not always about that official corporate communication tone of voice. Sometimes some clients want a more of a charming or clever type of tone of voice, and that's completely okay. It certainly needs to be emotional, right? How many of you have seen in your news feed a lot of content shared from like Upworthy.com and like Slate and all these like you'll never believe what this person did when they saw this, and then you have to actually click and watch it in order to get the answer. I hate when they do that, but it's got to be emotional. It's got to tug on our heartstrings because that's what we're motivated by as human beings. And it's got to live outside the purchase funnel. In some cases, it can drive purchase as well, right? So I'm not saying it can't be measured. At the end of the day, though, it has to be rooted in behavioral insights. Understand your audience, understand what they care about, understand where they hang out, and provide content that helps them in some way. Either helps them solve a problem, helps them get smarter, or helps them have fun, whatever that is. So the way that I look at this, and this is my personal view, and I talk about this in the book, there's kind of three ways to look at storytelling. It's one where your product, your brand, your business is the story. It's one where you are a character in a larger story, or it's one where you comment on a specific story. So when I go to a client and say, let's look at content from these three lenses, right? We can either look at it when you're kind of the official story, whether you're a character in the story, or whether you comment on a story. Now the flexibility comes here, right? That's where your lifestyle content may live. And then it's kind of, and I kind of went ahead when I showed you this slide here, but then you can build your content pillars looking at it through. So in this case, where your brand is the story, that's like product launches, that's events, or kind of that corporate marketing or corporate speak. Where your brand is a character in the story, it's highlighting customer stories. You know, when somebody has a great thing to say about you, you're a character in their story, right? And then it's proactive customer support. So you kind of catch my drift here, right? So it's thinking strategically about the content that you share. I have a client, I'm not going to mention their name because they could be following the hashtag here tonight. They have I'm trying to get them to think about storytelling. Right now it's just random things on their Facebook page, and they're like wondering, well, why are we only growing at 1% a month? And I look back and I say, well, here's why. You're doing this everywhere. It's like they're using social as a distribution channel and content distribution channel. Okay, so it kind of looks complicated. I'm going to speed up just for the sake of time. This is basically what I talked about earlier, the content supply chain, right? The moment that you have an idea, content planning, to the moment that it's pushed to either to a blog or to Twitter, what are the approval workflows needed to make sure that there's control around that content? Now the good news is that there's platforms that are available out there, and I'll name a few. You can write these down. Sprinkler is one. That's Sprinkler without an E. There's Spreadfast, and there's one called Kapost, K-A-P-O-S-T, which have built-in, a lot of the news organizations use this. When they manage all their contributing writers, they have a system that pushes that content through all these channels for approval, okay? You gotta build that supply chain. This is another supply chain or approval workflow for real-time content. Notice, 24 hours, 1 hour. Less approvers involved. Real-time capabilities. We're going to talk a little bit about this quickly. There's kind of three kind of lenses to look at this. What's trending in society or culture, what is resonant with your audience, and what's relevant to your brand. The ideal content lives right in here, right? If it's right here, it's useless because it doesn't align to your business goals. If it's right here, it's your audience isn't interested in it. A lot of companies are trying to do this using real time just because the Olympics is on, but it's not relevant to what they offer from a value proposition. And then building real-time listing capabilities, right? So this is for a larger company that wants to invest in a platform. The company's called SocialFlow. It's socialflow.com. It will tell you, it'll give you 6 hours in advance notice of what type of content that is trending within your community. So it gives you 6 hours to then mobilize a creative director or an agency to create a content based on a trending topic based on a topic that will soon be trending. Okay.
Sorry, what platform was that for?
SocialFlow.
That was SocialFlow.
Yeah, socialflow.com. So in this case, we're looking at NFL tweets. It just shows you what terms are trending, and it has different scoring algorithms. It's a pretty robust piece of software. I'm gonna skip over this piece. Okay, here we go. So converged media, and this, I'm almost done, then I'll open it up for questions. What is converged media? It's basically integrating paid, earned, and owned media in some fashion. There's hundreds of ways to do this. I've outlined 3. The easiest one is sponsored posts, right? How many of you own a Facebook page or manage your own Facebook page? Now, do you know that when you push a piece of content on Facebook, you're only reaching about 8 to 10% of your audience? You know that? And the reason why is Facebook wants you to pay to promote it. They want you to pay to reach an audience that's already opted in to read your content. And so in some cases, we build models that say when a certain piece of content reaches an engagement point, let's say 100 engaged users. An engaged user is somebody who likes, comments, or shares on a Facebook page. Once it reaches that 100 mark, within the first 3 hours, we're gonna put $100 behind it. I did this strategy with my own Facebook page promoting my book. Every time it reached a level, I put 10, 15, 20, 25, or 30, whatever it was, to reach a larger audience, and also to reach people who are friends of my followers on my Facebook page. Okay, so there's kind of the social media integration. Then there's content syndication. How many of you go to CNN.com, and if you scroll to the bottom of an article and you see other related articles, you click on it, it takes you to another kind of media publication. That is content syndication. So if you have a blogging platform and you want to reach a larger audience, you can invest in platforms like Outbrain, OUTBRAIN, that syndicates your content, its long form content, onto third-party channels. I want to stress one thing quickly, because most people don't realize this. Your Facebook status updates, your tweets, your Instagram videos, your Vine videos will never show up in Google. Ever. Twitter handles show up, like if you were to Google my name, my Twitter handle would show up, but if I write something about the Olympics and you search for Olympics, you're not going to see tweets from me. Okay? That's how it is. Twitter and Facebook not only block each other, but they block Google, right? They're becoming their own search engine. You can go to search.twitter.com and see all of the content, but it will not show up in Google. That's why long form content is very important from a blogging perspective to capitalize in the search results. So there's content syndication, and there's earned media amplification. So if somebody writes a favorable article about you, maybe it's the Wall Street Journal, or a customer writes a blog post about you, pushing that piece of content and putting paid media dollars behind it, maybe putting it into an ad unit, into a display unit and pushing it that way, or maybe packaging it up and putting it on your Facebook page and linking to that video. There's a lot of ways to do that. The important thing is to figure out the right strategy to do that, where you establish your benchmarks, you identify high-performing content, you determine what's the right integration point, you coordinate with your stakeholders, and you push that piece of content into using paid media. Investing in the right technology is the last piece of it. Now, you'll notice there's this is just a small data set of the larger spectrum. But if you think about all your social listening and analytics, you have some players here. You have Oracle, you have Adobe, you have Radian6 and Salesforce. You have Topsy, which was just acquired by Apple actually late last year. Search engine. Maybe it's going to be a Siri integration. You have Trax. That's kind of your social listening. Then your content publishing. I talked about this group earlier. You have Spreadfast, Sprinkler, Expion, or Hootsuite. Right? Those are content publishing platforms. Then you have your content marketing platforms: Compost, Contently, Relaborate, and eByline. Then if you're trying to empower a group of people, like employees or customers, to tell the brand story, these are your brand advocacy platforms. Yes, they do exist. Social Chorus, Dynamic Signal, and Fluid. And I'll make these slides available, so in case you have an Android with a horrible phone, or camera, sorry. And then converged media, right? So you can do converged media directly through Facebook, through sponsored posts, or Twitter through promoted tweets. But you can also use some of these other platforms that deliver the same experience outside of the platforms. Okay? A lot of stuff, huh?
Good stuff.
Yeah, is it? I hope so. Okay, so here's my contact information. The slides are actually right here on a SlideShare presentation. So it's slideshare.net/Bertopian/brand-as-media SVESM. So I'll leave this up for a while if you want to write it down. You can just download them directly from SlideShare. My phone number, Twitter handle, please don't text me after 8 p.m. unless it's an emergency. And or call me. I didn't put my email address, but if you want it, I can connect with you on LinkedIn. So, any questions before I hand out 10 books? Paul, do you want to do me a favor and
Sure, you stir those properly.
make sure? Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Whenever you're ready.
Let me, go ahead, I'm listening.
So, how do you measure if software-wise that what kind of software would you recommend for measuring social media?
So there's two ways to look at this. Okay. Well, I guess I have 11 actually. Okay. So there's something called social listening and social analytics. Okay?
Yeah.
Social listening basically scours the entire web, and it'll tell you what people are saying about your brand or your business, right? So if I'm Intel, I can say, what are people saying about Intel on Twitter? What are they saying in blogs? What's the sentiment? What's the share of voice, right? That's social listening. And it's good just to kind of see where you are in the hearts and minds of the world.
I'm sorry.
No,
That's not my question, so sorry. When you want to measure the performance of your investment.
I was getting there.
Okay.
The
sorry.
next piece of that is social analytics, or some people call it content performance, right? So looking at what's the right tool to measure if I'm tweeting the right way, if I'm using Facebook the right way, if I'm delivering enough clicks back to my website. So in that case, there's hundreds of vendors. It depends on, do you want an enterprise solution? I might go with Adobe Social because they have integration with Omniture and your web analytics platform, right? So they know when you tweet something, does that person click through to Adobe.com and then do they buy Adobe Photoshop, or do they download a white paper?
So it has to integrate back to your marketing platform,
Not necessarily.
but it should.
Well, think about the content, right? How often are you going to be linking back to a corporate website?
Well, if I am measuring my performance over multiple channels, right, and social media is one of my investments, then I want to see my return on investment for that piece of investment in the whole picture of my whole campaign.
Okay. Okay, so let me just say this. When a client comes to me and says, I want to sell more products using social media, I say, don't do it. Don't even use social media. Invest that money in search, or invest that money in email, because there's a tangible ROI in those two platforms.
Right.
Social media is not built on a relationship between a brand and its customers. It's built on a relationship between people. And when you approach it from that perspective, you have to. Now I'm not saying. Now I'm kind of dancing around the ROI question, because ROI measures the investment and the return on that investment. And if you're not selling directly from Facebook and Twitter, there's no way to measure ROI.
What's advertising, right?
It's just like advertising.
So people also measure how effective they are in advertising. So you're saying the tools you're talking about could help you measure the effectiveness, but not necessarily linked to ROI.
Well, okay, it actually depends, because one of my favorite Facebook pages is the NBA Facebook page, because they provide really compelling content. I can see videos and articles of LeBron James or Kobe Bryant, and then every 7 or 8 posts, they link to their e-commerce store, right? They're selling a jersey, and if I click on it and I look at the URL, they're tracking me. They're going to track purchases. Now they probably tested this, where they say, you know what? Maybe they started out a couple years ago and they did every day they did a buy this, and they didn't get any engagement, but they spent time providing relevant content, and then figured out the right balance of linking to their e-commerce site, and it's working for them. There's a book written by, anybody know who Seth Godin is? Yeah, he wrote a book about 11 years ago, way before his time, called Permission Marketing. It's the same concept. You spend time investing in your community and building trust. Then his philosophy was you ask permission to market your services to them, right? And NBA does that, right? They have 50 million fans, and they're probably getting a nice ROI off sales from, and they probably know like exactly where their fans are, like what geography. So when the LA Lakers make it to the playoff, they're probably gonna put a link to a Kobe Bryant jersey, right? Because they know that that's gonna deliver more sales than if they were to put whoever, somebody else. So I'm not saying you can't, but I'm saying there's other metrics to look at. There's share of voice metrics, there's sentiment metrics, within Facebook, because a lot of times what happens is clients will create a Facebook page and they'll try to put some promotional content, and then everybody's complaining. Where's my order? You guys, blah, 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 you know? PayPal's a great example. They were a client at my previous firm where they tried to be promotional, but they had a customer support issue. So they fixed that. So that was a tangible measurement, not an ROI measurement. If they were to look at call center volume, and if that went down, if they were investing more in social, there's a way to track, that's an ROI from a savings perspective.
So let's go
Okay.
a couple of books, and then we'll have a few more questions between us.
Terry East,
Ah,
WordPress developer. Are these cards mine?
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay, great.
Because I need some WordPress help. And I'll pay you.
Well,
I can't on my blog, I can't get the LinkedIn share button to work.
Oh.
When I click LinkedIn share, it pops up and it just edit. It doesn't pull in my metadata. Irritates me. Okay, David Solhaug.
okay.
Christine Oliver.
Yay.
Toshiba, senior storage analyst.
Ah.
How do you pronounce your name? Hirishikesh? Hirishikesh. Thank you. Tom Veller.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Grandcat. Christina Scott. Cool. Now there's a catch with these books, right? You know what the catch is? I want an honest Amazon review. If you think it sucks and want to give me two stars, I'm good with that. But be honest. Perry West.
Oh, I don't know if I pulled enough cards there.
Thank you.
Yeah, we may need a few more.
Okay.
R.J. Tatkin. Or Robert Tatkin, sorry.
Right here. Oh, there we go.
Cool. And Barbara. Yes, Barbara Freeberg. And we have actually two more.
Okay. All right. Okay, get that in the middle, get that one up. This one here. Here we go.
Julie Catherine Gowett. Oh, very cool.
And the last one.
Ruslin, IT manager.
Oh,
hey!
hey!
You fixed that, huh? You fixed that.
All right, a couple more questions.
Yes.
I noticed that you didn't really discuss anything about video or YouTube, and I just wanted to know where you see that as a category to implement for marketing.
Okay. YouTube. YouTube is the number 2 search engine behind Google, also owned by Google. The number 1 search term in YouTube is?
YouTube.
No. Anybody know?
How?
Google.
How to.
Oh, how to.
Yeah.
How to. My dog. Anybody play piano? What's that song by Canon? It's Paco. What is it?
Paco Bell.
Paco Bell. Beautiful song, right? Brides Get Married. That's one of my favorite songs. I should know who the composer is or musician. Anyway, I asked my daughter to learn it for me for Christmas last year, and she learned it. She's a pianist. She's like in 3 years now, and she learned it from a how-to video in YouTube. She learned how to make music in GarageBand through how-to videos. So if you think about like your business solution, like how to invest in stocks and bonds, or what is a Roth IRA? I have no idea what that is. So imagine, can you create content, video content, that kind of takes what people might search for in terms of how to, and produce some good content on it. I did a search for how to unstrip a strip screw, and what did I find? Number 1 video was one from Lowe's, and it was like 15 seconds.
So where do you implement it? What area do you put it in?
I mean, it depends. If you have a huge marketing budget, you may put I don't recommend putting commercials. Like BlackBerry used to be a client of mine, and all they would do is they would take their 30-second spots that they would put on TV and put them on YouTube, and they thought that was successful. It got a lot of views. They paid for those views, right? But again, it goes back to, my good friend Jay Bear wrote a book called Utility, and it's about being a utility to your customers, being helpful. A commercial, 30-second commercial, is not helpful. How-to videos are commercial. If you can approach it, if you can create custom content
Or
in
link
YouTube.
it, how to link it, or where you should link it, like to Facebook, or just link it to your
Okay.
page, or.
So there's a huge debate. She's asking about YouTube videos in Facebook. There's a huge debate right now that says, when you have a video and you want to share it on your Facebook page, do you just take that URL from YouTube and post it, or do you upload it natively to Facebook? And so here's the situation. You'll get more views and more engagement if you upload it natively to Facebook, because it takes up more screen space. Whereas if you did it through YouTube, the video player is much smaller and it shows up in the feed as a smaller unit. But the tracking, you're not going to get all the page views. All those page views and views that you would get in the feed, if it were YouTube, it wouldn't show up if you uploaded it directly. So it depends, really, what you want. Some people are creating custom video content for Facebook and custom for YouTube.
So you could do both, right?
You can do both.
Yeah.
You got the
You can
bandwidth.
totally do both.
Okay, 2 more questions.
So I would describe overall your strategy as for a company with pretty goodly amount of resources to apply different people in different roles and different jobs. What about a small company with just a few people struggling to kind of get stuff to happen? Where do they fit into this?
Okay, there's a company called, they're in the city, they do enterprise mobility software, Visage, anybody heard of Visage Mobile?
Yes.
VISAGE Mobile, okay? They have 2 people in their marketing department. Go to their Facebook page, go to their Twitter account, go to their blog. They have a blog called Chief Mobility Officer. And they have employee engineers and product managers who are participating, right? They are the brand journalists writing content. They also have an agency who's writing content. So now they're still, they're probably $1 million company or several $1 million company, right? So they still have budget to hire an agency and to invest in some of these things. But for the startup that has 10 people, you're gonna have to focus, right? Maybe just focus on Twitter for now, right? And as you grow and scale, you can then, as you hire people, you can kind of scale appropriately. The last thing you want to do is create a presence in all these platforms if you don't have the resources to actually manage it and produce content for it. So